finding smart people to lean on. Again, I think out of the hard lessons that I've learned, learning that I don't know everything and it's okay. I think that was really hard. That's probably another hard lesson I learned. Learning that it's okay not to know everything, and to not have this fear in reaching out to people that know different things or that know something a little bit better than you do.
What does the future of work look like from where you're sitting? It's one of those big topics in leadership and management these days, and loads of things can have a huge impact upon it. A plethora of factors, if you will. The big ones right now are the effects and the development of AI, changing perspectives and trends as new generations join the workforce, and of course, the inescapable, the ongoing adjustments resulting from COVID and the lockdown years, not to mention many more besides. Today's guest is Kellie Tinnin, president and owner of Kellie Tinnin Consulting, which is a learning and development consulting firm based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. With a passion for learning, Kellie's goal is to help organizations succeed. She's skilled in instructional design, organizational development, and various training techniques. And so Kellie does quite a lot of work with companies and organizations to help them prepare for, adjust to the changes, and be ready, really, for the ever-evolving future of work. And we'll be talking about all of that today, along with some great tips and lessons learned that may help you in your own leadership journey. And before we start, don't forget to visit www.leadernotaboss.com to sign up for my newsletter and get your invite to join the Integrity Leaders online community for new managers, first-time company founders, and other fresh to leadership leaders.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Kellie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really looking forward to chatting all things leadership and more.
Happy to be here. So it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you. And I'm going to kick us off really by handing over to you a little bit to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a bit about yourself, about your background, your career, what you do today, and why you do it.
My name is Kellie. I'm located in the United States, and I am in the great state of New Mexico, which I'm near Santa Fe, about an hour south of Santa Fe in Albuquerque. And I run a 100% women-owned small business, Kellie Tinnin and Associates, and we are a full-service performance improvement consulting firm. So we really specialize in changing the way that people work. We want to improve people, processes, and performance. And so I have been working in this field really actively since 2016, and actually branched off and started my own company during the pandemic. I figured it was just time to really transition into that. I was in a position doing training and development, talent development, really. But I was in a very niched area, and I wanted to be able to serve a bigger range of clients, so to speak. And so, like many others, the pandemic just seemed like a good time to be able to do that. There's a little bit of irony with that, I suppose. It's like who makes a big life change during the pandemic, but I guess a lot of people did. And so that's where I ended up with my firm today. And so we help small and mid-sized businesses really, again, help improve their people, processes, and performance. I really feel that it's important for people to be happy at work. And I think it's a big cycle. When people are happy and performing at work, the organization thrives, and the community that the people in the organization serve really thrive. And so that's really our end game and our core value, or our core goal, I should say.
Yeah, so I mean, people making big life changes during the pandemic, I think that actually was fairly common, at least professionally, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
And I don't know how it worked in the States or what kind of government support you got, but certainly in the UK, we had this thing called the furlough scheme where basically employers were paid up to it was fairly high. I think it was 70% of people's salary to cover them if the only other option was redundancy. And so a lot of people were being paid not to work, in effect, during the pandemic, which obviously gives you a lot of time to think and explore alternatives, maybe take on a new skill, think about starting a business. And it's quite an interesting one. What was it like in the States as well? I don't really know much about that.
It was really similar, actually. Many of the state governments implemented some, for lack of a better term, enhanced unemployment benefits for people, which, I mean, there was a lot of need there, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it supplemented a lot of individuals' salaries for businesses that were shut down and really impacted by the closures in the pandemic. And so, I mean, same thing. A lot of people had a lot of time, I think, to think and upskill or reevaluate really what their priorities were, I think.
Indeed. And we hear a lot about some employers, let's say, a small group, hopefully, who are maybe not that sensitive to what people were going through during the pandemic. And so people didn't want to go back to work for them afterwards. And yeah, I feel like that probably played into it as well. And then, of course, the Great Resignation was, I suppose, a symptom really of all of these things, wasn't it?
I think so. I've told a lot of people, I think we were really, there were underlying, I think, hints that we were probably at that point as a culture, as a work culture, I should say. And I think the pandemic just really kind of pulled the rug out from everybody's feet and kind of forced people to take a look at that from the employee and the individual going to work side in terms of evaluating their priorities. Is this really something I want to do? Do I want to have a 3-hour commute every day? Do I want to do something that I just feel okay about? And I think from the employer side and the organizational side, it's forcing companies to look at, well, what's our value proposition to not just our external customer, but our internal customer as well. Like, what's our value proposition to our employees, and how are we going to add value there in order to retain people and really kind of shift what has been a traditional work culture for us in the States, and I'm even thinking abroad, for probably 100 years, give or take.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's that kind of scale, isn't it? Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, I think, from the employer's perspective. I mean, I don't think it was all negative, was it? In a lot of ways, it was an opportunity, which a lot of companies saw for what it was, and I think were in a better position once everything opened up again and they were ready to go, whereas everyone else was still panicking with their policies and all of that sort of thing. One example that comes up quite a lot, I think, because of the contrast between how it is now and how it was then, is Twitter, or X, as it's now called.
Yeah.
Because at the time, and as we were sort of starting to ease out of the pandemic, they were probably leading the way in a lot of respects with their remote working policies and the way they were dealing with employees. And then obviously the big event.
Yeah.
And all of that's got reversed. And so it's quite an interesting contrast even within the same company, I think.
Yeah, it is. And it is very interesting. I think it makes it a little hard on employees too. Just a lot of that creates uncertainty and I think a little bit of fear as well. So there's probably a little bit of that to deal with.
I mean, this, I guess, is one example of the sort of challenges that you support businesses in. So could you maybe tell us a bit more about some of the other types of challenges that you help organizations with, and maybe give us an idea of what are the most common problems that those businesses will face?
Yeah. So really some of the top things that we deal with, as we've been talking about, the future of work demands, the work landscape has changed. As someone had told me a while back when we were talking, and I just kind of liked the term because it fit well. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's true. We can't go back to what was, because what was doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of companies operated remotely or in a hybrid sense, so to speak, and production didn't falter, and employees are now wondering, well, why do we have to go back? So I think that's one of the things to really look at. And from a value proposition for your company, what are we going to bring to the table to be competitive, to be able to retain employees? And I think part of that rolls into kind of my second challenge that I see among many organizations is just this real lack of engagement in their work. And the thing is the work landscape is not just changing because of our hand being forced by a pandemic. I really think that this was on the cusp of happening at a much slower pace, and that just pushed the fast forward button for those of you that remember VHS tapes. We won't go there, but anyway, it just pushed the fast forward button. And I think there's a lack of engagement because there's this disconnect between employees today don't just want to go to work and punch a time clock and produce an output. They want to understand what the bigger picture is and how their role fits into that bigger picture and have a little bit of purpose and meaning. And our workforce, in terms of the people that make up the workforce, is very different, with different needs, different desires, different wants. And so I think that contributes to really those two things. How do we improve employee engagement, which therefore improves output and retention, as well as how do we become more competitive to meet the demands of the future workforce, and how do we embrace that, what the future of work really is. And then the other thing that really is a challenge is we do a lot of training as part of our performance improvement from the development and the facilitation side. And the thing with training is a lot of companies will think, well, I need training to fix this. I need training to fix that. And the skill is really in diving deeper into the problem to really understand, is this a training problem or is this something else? And the other thing is, training is much like fixing an engagement problem, future of work demands. It's a behavior change. It's actually changing the behavior and rewiring, in a sense, the wires in your brain to connect differently. And that doesn't happen with one training class. And so really helping stakeholders understand that we can implement this training, but we really need to make this a whole event. And this really needs to be on a larger long-term scale in order to be able to make long-term culture changes in your organization and to be able to measure the impact.
Well, there's several things there to pick out, I think. One, and I guess it's similar to what we've already been talking about, isn't it? Is this idea of the future of work. And one of the really difficult dynamics, I think, that shifted over the last few years is as you say, is what makes the company, the employer, competitive to the talent market. Mm-hmm. I mean, even 5 years ago, nobody was even really talking or thinking about that. It was just, if you want the salary, you accept our terms. You can't, if you want to work here, you've got to persuade me as the employer, not the other way around.
Right.
Whereas now I think it's at least 50-50. It might even have skewed in the other direction, where, you know, you've got to persuade people why it's a good place to work. And I think part of that is all the things you're talking about. It's the culture and how you change that, how you maintain it, how you can't just throw in a 1-day training course and then have zero follow-up and nothing to make it stick, if you like.
Right.
So yeah, some really interesting and difficult challenges that you're working on there.
It is, but it's impactful change, and I think as people in general, we spend so much time with work, and believe it or not, whether we want to believe it or not, a lot of our identity is shaped around the work that we do or impacted by the work that we do. And so I think it really makes an impact on people and organizations, and over long term, the community, the bigger picture.
I think it's a responsibility as well of the employer, of the bosses, the managers, the leaders, delete as applicable.
Yeah.
Because people by necessity have to spend so much of their lives at work. I mean, just on the time and the percentage of the hours in the day alone, most people, that's where they will spend the majority of their time. And so there is a responsibility, I think, for employers, for companies to make sure that is maybe not a nice and fun environment. That's not always possible, but at least a passable one that's not going to make everyone miserable all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it is. I've said this to a lot of people. I think as leaders, you take on this responsibility of ensuring that you are making things better for the people in the team that you lead. And so I think that's really important, and that plays right into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess there's it's a minimum standard required versus an aspirational of what it should be, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, and I mean, there are stats out there, there's studies, there's research being done on this, and people have tied, greater staff happiness, greater job satisfaction, all of those things are tied to, at the end of the day, better performance for the team, for the company, even in financial terms as well. So, while it's the right thing to do, it's also a good thing to do if you're trying to get the best out of your business. So, that's what I come back to quite often as a persuader, much as I find that a bit of a distasteful reason for doing it. It's unavoidable, isn't it, in a capitalist world? So you set up your own company and you've been running that for a few years now. Apart from the pandemic then, because that's the obvious one, what would you say has been the biggest challenge in that process of setting up and running your own business?
The funny thing is we always think we're on an island and that we're the only one experiencing certain challenges or having the certain doubts, but indeed we're not. And so I think realizing, one, that you're not facing those challenges alone, that you're not on an island is important. And to also realize that you don't have to do it all yourself. This isn't the first business venture I've been involved in. I actually came back to New Mexico to work in a family contracting business for a time. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't want to do. The irony is, by working in family business, a lot of time you learn the things that you don't want to do. But I did. I learned a lot of things I didn't want to do. And one of those was to really remind myself, you're not on an island and you can't do it all yourself. And you're also not you're not the only one experiencing these challenges. Like, surprise, we're not that unique as humans sometimes. And to be able to lean on people, to lean on other business owners and other people to help you work through some of just the challenges of whether it's working by yourself or do I launch this new product? Do I launch a podcast? Whatever it is, I think just having people, I think people were meant to be social and just kind of building that core tribe around you, so to speak.
I guess the next question really leads in from the last one, which is, what would you say is the hardest lesson you've learned over that time?
A lot. I mean, again, from family business, I learned I learned a lot about how to lead people through just seeing ways that I didn't want to lead people, or seeing ways that I didn't like people being led, I should say. So I learned a lot about leadership, about my own skills. Also through the years, and especially in the last couple of years, I've learned that life and your priorities can change in an instant. And so, the time is really now to go after what you want, because things can change really rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true of the last few years. We're labouring the point a bit there, aren't we? But yeah, I think there's quite a few people I've spoken to who've talked about their leadership lessons in the context of seeing it done the wrong way. And I mean, that's true of myself as well, to be fair. That's why I'm doing this podcast, as a result of experiences like that and trying to spread the good approaches instead. And I think, I identify as well with a lot of what you're saying about the family business and having to pick up things you don't want to do. I think that's true of small businesses as well.
Yeah.
Often because there's so few people in the business, but all of these things need doing. So someone's got to do it. So everyone ends up doing something they maybe aren't that interested in. And I suppose, we could draw that comparison to any job, couldn't we? To a certain point.
Yeah. I think that runs the gamut for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe it's more focused and harder to avoid in the smaller and the family kind of businesses, though.
It is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll come back to leadership later, because I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
What would you, if you had to pick, say, 3 or 5 of your top tips to any aspiring entrepreneur in the audience, what would those be?
Definitely don't get married to one idea.
I'm glad you finished that sentence.
Yeah, don't get married, period. No, don't get married to one idea, not a person, not talking about people, just the idea. And by that, I mean, be willing to think outside the box, be willing to challenge yourself. What comes to mind for me is I use the Kodak example a lot, and how they were so glued to the fact that film was the end all be all. They just had a really hard time seeing what was coming and seeing what was really knocking them right in the face with the digital era, which was kind of really was kind of their, I guess, as Shakespeare readers would know, kind of their tragic flaw, so to speak. So I think being able to change your mind, being able to be challenged, and being willing to think about your ideas, essentially to make them the best that they can be. And to do what's going to be best to serve your customer. Finding smart people to lean on. Again, I think out of the hard lessons that I've learning that I don't know everything and it's okay. I think that was really hard. That's probably another hard lesson I learned. Learning that it's okay not to know everything, and to not have this fear in reaching out to people that know different things, or that know something a little bit better than you do. And then finding a tribe. I've been really lucky to find a group of people that they're really my biggest cheerleaders, but at the same time, they're not afraid to give me constructive and honest feedback. And they're willing to tell me, like, this just doesn't work, or this was great, or you should do this, or you should wear red instead of yellow, like even down to those sorts of things.
Yeah, some great tips there. Yeah, I do like the Kodak example. The other one that always springs to my mind is Blockbuster Video.
Yeah.
And I think for them, it's worse because there was the direct comparison, wasn't there, to Netflix at the same time. And what's the other one? The one that got bought out by Amazon in the end. I can't remember what they're called. They used to post the DVDs to you, so you didn't have to go to the shop.
Oh, gosh, I can't remember.
No, me neither. Anyway, Someone in the audience will probably know. Drop us a comment and let us know.
Yeah.
It's that kind of that dual thing of not being so firmly fixed to your one idea that, you know, this is what we do, we're never going to change it. But also, I think there's a need, especially these days, to keep an eye on what the next technology is going to be and what that impact will have on your industry and what can you do to leverage it so you don't get left behind. That sort of forward-looking vision as well.
I think so. And it happens fast. It happens very fast today. I think anyway.
It depends on the technology, doesn't it? And the sphere that it's in. I think anything IT or computing related, it's just getting faster and faster.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, what business doesn't rely on that these days? You can't afford not to be paying attention, I think. Yeah. Also love the tribe as well and having those people around who can give you the honest feedback. And then your second point, I think, really underlines for me one of those big myths about leadership and managers generally. And it's one of the things that really winds me up when people get stuck in this one around thinking that because you have that position of responsibility, you're expected to know everything about everything and know all the answers. And if you ever say the phrase, I don't know, that's like the worst sin a leader can commit. And I hate that mentality. It's nobody's fault. It's just one of those like self-perpetuating myths, isn't it? Because we've all worked for that kind of manager who, even if they didn't, they always had the appearance of having the answer to any question.
Yeah.
And then quite often you find it's the wrong answer, like 6 months later when it's too late to do anything about it. But and that's exactly the crux of the problem for me, because if you think you always have to have the answer, then you just give an answer and it might not be right. Whereas if you've got that self-awareness, the confidence, the cultural context in your organization as well is important to be able to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, let me find out, or why don't we find out together? You know, any of these leadership phrases, I think you end up having better outcomes in the long run because you're not going down those wrong avenues or the wrong turns as much.
I do too. And I think it shows an element of humility to your team as well, to say, like, to be, again, like you said, self-aware enough to say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. And I think it models that behavior for your team, for them to know, hey, you know what, I don't have to have all of the answers either, but I'm willing to find out.
Absolutely. And another one that comes to mind is vulnerability as well. It's really good for that because, again, it's something that a lot of people struggle with because I think it's got this sort of false equivalence to telling everyone about your personal life or your feelings and all of this all the time. And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. But actually, just saying, I don't know the answer to something is being quite vulnerable with your team, but in a relatively low stakes way, at least personally.
Yeah.
So that's, quite a good way of getting a foot in the door in that one as well. So there we go. We're solving all the problems now, aren't we? So let's talk a bit more about leadership then, a bit more specifically. So first question I have for you on this one is, and I know I've asked for lessons already, but leadership specifically, what would you say is your biggest lesson in that field from your career so far?
You know, I've watched a lot of leaders. I've been exposed to a lot of leaders across the board. And I think what really resonates for me is the philosophy, for lack of a better term, that you can be kind to people and be a leader. You can lead people in a caring manner, and you can care about the people that you lead. You can exhibit those characteristics like kindness, caring, vulnerability, humility, and be a good and successful leader.
Love that. I'd probably go a bit further though and say, rather than you can, you must.
Yeah.
If you want to be like a really successful leader, if you want to be known as a great leader, I think you have to do that.
I would say you're on point with that, because when you said that, there's situations and people that come to mind that are in a leadership position, but you know, they lead with fear and is that really leading? No, you're really just getting people to move in the direction that you want, because scare the crap out of them. And I that doesn't build a good culture.
No, it's not leadership.
No.
To my definition, anyway.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, if you have to stand behind someone threatening them with a stick all the time, you're not really leading them, are you? You're pushing, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Bullying, potentially, as well, to be honest.
Pretty much, yeah. That's probably, that is what it is. So.
Yeah, indeed. And it's, I quote this quite a lot, and I always butcher the quote, but it's a couple of quotes from one of your countrymen, actually, former President Eisenhower. And there's two big leadership quotes of his that I really like. One of them is about leadership being about, persuading people to do something because they think they want to, or because they think it was their idea, or they agree with the good. But the other less quoted one is exactly on point for this, is about if you have to beat someone around the head to get them to do something, that's assault, not leadership. And that's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it?
I like that. But it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you think about what the source of that quote as well, like a guy who's famous the world over as a military leader, like you wouldn't expect a quote like that to come from a man like that necessarily, but
sure,
especially of his generation as well.
Yeah.
And I think this leads us perhaps quite nicely into the next question I have, which is, what would you say is the biggest mistake a leader can make? And you're just going to say beating people around the head now, aren't you?
Using any kind of sticks or tree limbs, probably not a good idea. But I think it goes back to, for me, really thinking that you have to have all the answers, and then that's why you have people. Just because you're in a leadership role doesn't make you the smartest person in the room, and that's why you have a team of people to bounce ideas off of, to challenge your perspective. And I think those are all important. And I think it's a mistake as a leader when we don't give our team the agency to really make decisions and to challenge and those sorts of things. I think that's what makes better outcomes.
I agree. Again, yeah. I think there's quite a lot of key leadership behaviours that come out of this same mistake, aren't there? I think, like the aspect of hiring people who know more about things than you do is one thing. But once you've done that, you then have to trust their expertise. You've got to lean into their knowledge. You've got to, the team should be greater than the sum of its parts. And in order to do that, the leader has to be able to make best use of all of those individual parts and together as well. So I think there's quite a few managers out there, quite a few entrepreneurs even, who will hire these hyper qualified people just so that they've got hyper qualified people and they can say that. And then they just override them in every decision. And at that point, you kind of think, well, why are you wasting your money on those people? Like, if you're not going to listen to them.
Right.
And there's the micromanagement aspect as well. It's all, I think it's all interrelated, isn't it, as part of that same problem?
It is. Yeah. I think they are very much related to each other.
Yeah. And yet still depressingly common.
Very common. Yeah.
Okay, well, back onto the positive side of things. What has been your personal best experience of being led?
Gosh, I have a lot, actually. The irony is we always tend to kind of talk about like, oh, my crazy experiences, but I actually have a lot of good experiences as well. Actually, one of my former bosses, which I'm still really good friends with today and still go down and work at her office every now and then. This individual, the thing with her that I really admired is she had a knack for bringing out the best in people. And she really saw in me things that I didn't see in myself. And we were having a conversation one day. This was many years ago. And I don't remember what I was rattled up about, but I was rattled up about something. And she just like put her pen down and looked up at me and said, she said, I'd never met anybody who is as hard on themselves as you are. And you need to stop. And that to this day has stuck with me. I mean, she's always been my biggest cheerleader, despite the fact that I don't work for this person anymore. She is somebody I still go to for advice, somebody I still run ideas by, and still to this day gives me constructive and honest feedback. Just really wanted me to succeed and had a knack at the time when we were working together for bringing out the best skills in me, or showing me ways to highlight what my best skills were. And still does that to this day. I mean, it hasn't stopped, even though I don't work for this person, and I haven't worked for this person since 2016. And we still have a great relationship, and I still consider her a leader in my circle, because just her insight and perspective I couldn't put a price on it.
And it speaks to so many of the things we talked about already, doesn't it? I mean, the top of the list has to be caring about people.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if she didn't care that she would have kept supporting you when you're not really her responsibility anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all. And in fact, I go to her office sometimes just to work and use her electricity and drink the drinks out of her refrigerator. And yeah. So I'm very lucky to have developed those relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I think that's the real power of leadership as well, is being able to do that for someone. Yeah. But also the leaders who are really good at that are able to kind of see what each individual needs at any given moment. So for you, it was about giving you the confidence boost when you needed it. Yeah. Someone else, it might have been about, well, you need to develop this skill. We'll pay for you to do it, or for this person, it might be, look, not sure you're the best fit for this company. However, I will help you find somewhere else. I think that's another overlooked aspect of leadership as well, is it's not one size fits all, and you do have to be situational, contextual. You've got to be flexible to individual needs as well.
You absolutely do. Yeah.
If you could go back in time and do one thing differently in your career, what would it be?
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't let fear or other people's doubts drive my decisions. 100%. I spent far too long in my career letting other people's baggage, because really at least I feel like when somebody, in a lot of cases, when somebody expresses like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or why would you want to do that? I feel like they're coming from a place of their own fear, and it doesn't really have anything to do with you. And I spent far too long letting those types of things drive the decisions that I made for my career, for my business, etc. And so if I could go back, I wouldn't do that. I think over time I've now been equipped with the skill set to not be able to not do that, and to recognize when those types of things are occurring. But yeah, I wish I would have recognized it a little sooner.
That's a skill of its own, isn't it? Being able to recognize good or bad advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it highlights the importance again of what you were saying earlier about having that tribe of people around you. As a business owner, as a leader, even as an employee, it is important, I think, to have a community of peers.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the thought leader, Scott Miller, and he wrote this book called Management Mess to Leadership Success. It actually was his first book of several. And I don't remember exactly verbatim what he said in the book, but it was something along the lines of, there was somebody giving him feedback that he just normally wouldn't take feedback from. And I think that's important for us to remember too, like along those same lines of letting fear drive your decisions, remembering and asking yourself, would I take feedback from this person in my normal everyday life? And if I wouldn't, then let it go.
Yes, I think I've heard that quote before, and it is a good one. I agree. I like it. It's not always that easy in practice.
No, it's unfortunately. I know. We're a work in progress every day.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's the human condition, isn't it?
It is.
Leadership Heroes.
And I've only got one question left for you now. It is my favourite question, so every guest gets the opportunity to answer this one. And it's called Leadership Heroes. So the question is, if you had to pick one person, they could be anyone you like, alive, dead, past, present, real, fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
Yeah. So Lucille Ball, actually, would be my pick. And not only because I think that she was probably one of the best, if not the best, comedic actress that has ever existed. Behind the scenes, she was, in my opinion, really revolutionary in terms of becoming the head of a studio at a time when women were not really revered and they weren't really looked at as leaders or people who could be in these big decision roles, so to speak. And she, I feel like she was really revolutionary for her time. And I just think she was an underrated genius. That's just me personally.
I would have to agree for a totally different reason, because I'm not sure how well known this is, but if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have Star Trek.
That is true. Yes. That is.
So, for me, that's enough. Like, leadership hero just for that.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
No, that's a good pick. And it's a unique one. I've not had it before. So yeah. Extra points. Yeah, but I think it's definitely an inspiring example of a leader in an industry where, particularly as a woman, where, as you say, would not really have been given the time of day. She must have had to work incredibly hard to get where she was, and then once there, to stay there and be as influential as she was, clearly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think even today, the industry, that particular industry is difficult. And so I can imagine what it would have been like at that time.
Yeah. Do you know, in a lot of ways, it might have been better. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Some of what you read today, yeah.
Yeah, point well taken.
I don't know. Maybe just less out in the open then than it is now. Maybe no different.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pleasant thought. Anyway, Kellie, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely talking to you. If any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, I'm sure many of them would. Would you like to point them towards your website or social media profiles? Or
Absolutely. So the best place to find me is my website. It's kellietinnin.com, and that's Kellie, KELLIE, TINNIN.com. And if you want to find me on social media as well, if you just search my name, Kellie Tinnin, you'll find me there on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. So I'd love to see you there and to chat on the social lines, and you'll occasionally see pictures of my 3 English bulldogs and all of their crazy antics. So
amazing. Excellent. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you again so much, Kellie.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Kellie, for your time and conversation today. It's not every day that a chat like that can go from COVID to Kodak to Netflix versus Blockbuster, from the future of work to the lessons of successful leadership, and back again. I really enjoyed that, listener. I hope you did too. And earlier on, Kellie spoke about the importance of finding your tribe and how impactful that can be to have that group of people to offer you support and constructive feedback. If you are a new leader or first-time manager and you feel like you don't have that right now, it can be difficult to find it, especially in a workplace setting. That's where Integrity Leaders, the community, can help. Find out more and sign up today at www.leadernotaboss.com. Thank you for being with us today and for listening to the show. If you did enjoy it and found it helpful, hopefully both, then please do leave us a rating or a review wherever it is that you're listening. Join me again next week when I'll be speaking with Jimmy Okubanjo about workplace trauma, her experiences with it, what she's learned as a result, her documentary film, Arise Firebird, and what leadership means to her. Hope you'll be back with us again, and until then, stay safe, keep thinking about the future of work and what impact your own leadership is having, and as always, be a leader, not a boss.